Hello, this is Stephen Dupree of NowEnergetics.com, based on YUEN Method and the power of neutrality. Welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time, welcome. This is an article that has an addendum. There's a video on clearing perception blocks, and there was 16 blocks that I had documented at one time, and I thought it was time for an update. I added 2 more, so we're going to talk about the 2 that I added. There's another video. I think I might label this one the sequel. But there's another video on the the first 16 blocks. So the 2 new ones that I documented were combination weakness, which is something that we haven't touched on much, and it's something in YUEN Method that was, it's kind of done in passing, and some of the older folks that have been with the method for a while know about combination weakness, but it's not something Dr. Yuan talks about very often, so I'm bringing it up here. It can be a powerful block because people look at things individually sometimes. And when we look at shapes and triads and pentagons and hexagons and octagons and things like that, it's not just the individual issues that we find that go weak, but when we look at those shapes, those many-sided shapes, we're looking at combinations, associations, and sometimes orders, because if you look at a shape, even a simple triad, there are many combinations of things that can go weak. Very often, individual items in a triad might be strong separately, but in combination, they may go weak. So a triad itself you may need to discern that, and we do that with looking at combination weakness. So there are some examples further on about that, and I'll go through them. And the second one, number 18, the new one, is the all or nothing energy. And this is a perfectionist kind of clearing. This is a perception block that happens to a lot of perfectionists. And it's very much an on or off. Now, this method looks very much at, kind of binary thinking and mentality, but at the same time, that can be a block for many people, especially perfectionists. So I go over that in more detail further on in the article here. So, and as a practitioner, and I'll just mention this, you have to watch your own perfectionist tendencies, because it's very common to project energy into a situation. If you don't know that's your block or your weakness, you can create, some kind of block in a client from even perceiving a shift. So that's very important, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The biggest thing with the all or nothing mentality, the 1 or 0 mentality of a lot of perfectionists, is they're not satisfied with incremental improvement. We'll talk about that in a minute. So down at the bottom of the article is where I go into more detail. So the first part of the article just goes into the cliff notes of each of the 18, and then I go into more depth down here. So let's just scroll down to the number 17 and 18 here. So combination weakness, you can read a little bit more about it here, but it's not something a lot of folks know about if you're newer to the method. So just be aware that when you're working with triads, when you're working with shapes, look at the number of combinations that may go weak. And sometimes you can do a very high level clearing, all combinations in this triad, and you can clear that as a very general clearing. And you want to do that in most cases. You don't want to have to get specific if you don't need to, but you could also say, there are, let's say in a pentagon, you could say, let's see, there are 5 combinations that are weak in that particular triad. So, or a pentagon as an example, and the combination could be 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. And so you don't have to name them necessarily, but you could numerically profile and say, well, there's 5 combinations in that pentagon that go weak, and you can clear it that way. It's a more specific clearing. So just be aware of combinations, and it's not something that is very often talked about. I don't see many people clearing combination weakness. One of the ones that I know comes up very often is the notion of when you're a practitioner and you're assisting clients, and the practitioner may say that, well, I'm not, I'm having trouble with my practice or whatever. And a lot of practitioners have the combination weakness of of healing and abundance going weak together. Healing separately is strong, abundance separately is strong, and they'll convince themselves that they've cleared everything with abundance and they've cleared everything with healing, but when the two go together, they go weak. So that's a combination weakness. Or separately, they would be strong, but they go together in the simplest case of two elements here of healing and abundance. So it's a very common healer experience. And it's, I mentioned here, it's a vowel poverty experience. So each one of those things would be okay. But when you put the healing and the abundance together, you get the shaman kind of energy. And many people are weak to the combination of those two things. So just be aware of that. It comes up very often in clearings. And for some people, for some practitioners, and again, if you project that into your clients, or you're projecting that energy out, sometimes you won't even attract clients because of that. So, or if you attract clients, they're going to not want to pay you and that kind of thing. So that's a very important one. So I kind of explained it a bit more, how to look for, the elements, the combined weaknesses. And be aware too that you could have abstract weaknesses too. So I mentioned this too. A lot of folks are weak to certain numbers too. So as you go through the clearings, have in the back of your mind that some folks that are not perceiving change could be weak to the actual numbers too. So we have to clear that sometimes. And I mentioned this here. The things in threes weakness is a very common thing. So if you're clearing triads and someone's not noticing a shift, it's not always a very complicated thing. It might be a very simple thing, like someone is weak to certain numbers. And until you clear that weakness, they're not going to notice any clearings that have to do with, let's say, triads. If it's a pentagon, it's, fives, that type of thing. So that's a very, very common, it happens more than you would think that people are weak to numbers. So be aware of that. So that's combination weakness. It's kind of got a lot of layers to it. You can read through this, but use it in your clearings. It's very important. So the other number 18 that I added is this all or nothing energy, the perfectionist energy, I would call it. And when you have an all or nothing kind of mentality, it's a mentality that you're not satisfied. So you either have 100% improvement or nothing, and nothing in between. So it's the rejection of anything but 100%. So perfectionists, most people would say, well, you're just striving for 100%. No, for in our work here, it's really, you either get 100% or you get nothing. So if you're a practitioner and you don't get exactly 100% of the issue for a particular client, they perceive nothing because you're projecting that energy into them, that I either get everything or nothing. There's no in between. Everything or I go home. So the person may not perceive a change. So it's very important in our own energy to be able to be satisfied with incremental improvement. Immediate results doesn't mean 100% you've hit the button. It means you're working towards, you're following the weakness, and there could be 30 weaknesses that you have to clear to get 100% improvement. So you have to be neutral with incremental improvement. So if you have perfectionist tendencies, people that aren't satisfied with incremental improvement, incremental immediate improvement, that's going to be a block for them, and it's going to be a block for the clients they work on. So very, very important concept. It's not something that's talked about very much, but let's get everyone that's reading this article now or listening to this video neutral to this incremental improvement, and delete the notion of the one big button. So I mentioned that a lot. There's folks especially if you're a perfectionist, you're looking for that one big button. And as we've mentioned in other articles, you're going to have, very often there's 5 things that are 20%. There's a million-fold effect. There's a million, collective influence or cumulative effect or something like that. So it's not just one big button usually. And when you get that, kind of in your personality, you have to get neutral to that notion, or you're not going to get the incremental improvement during a session that folks are going to acknowledge as you move closer and closer to let's say what would be 100% improvement, right? So it's very, very important to be neutral to this all or nothing mentality. This is what I call, it's a Beavis and Butthead mentality. Either it sucks or it rocks. There's nothing in between. So we don't want that mentality. We want to be okay with that incremental middle, that we're working toward incremental improvement. So that's all or nothing energy, and that's number 17 and 18 of the new perception block. So, and understand that you can clear this whole page too. If if perception goes weak, you can clear the whole page first and then go back after if someone isn't noticing a shift. So you can do things very abstractly. Be very, very aware that you can do a lot of these clearings abstractly. You don't have to know, and that's another perfectionist weakness or academic block, that I have to know it, I have to understand it, I will have to have read all 18 and understand it completely, and someone has to give me a grade, because it's like a test or something. It should be, you should use these very abstractly and not have any expectation or anticipation that this is some kind of academic exercise. You want to experience it first. You want to clear it, experience it first, have the client experience it first. You can read about it, learn about it later. So, don't get too caught up in the details of any of these very, very long documents sometimes that have a lot of individual items on them, but you can just clear the whole page in one shot. So that's a very good way to abstract clear. And it's actually one of the ways with numerical profiling. Another article is abstract clearing. One of the abstract clearings, it is counting up to a number. There are 5 things, and just clear the 5 things. There's also an abstract clearing method would be clearing a page of something that someone else has done. So you don't have to, abstract means abstract in many dimensions, let's say. So that's clearing 18 common perception blocks. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.